So I know we've done this before, but still, like, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, no problem. Oh, right now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Eric, I'm Rett Larson. I'm currently the strength and conditioning coach for the women's national volleyball team over in Germany. But before that, I've been with the probably for about 8 years now. I've been just working with women's volleyball teams in the Netherlands before Germany, and then before that, I was with the Chinese national team for about 5 years. And before I became a volleyball guy, I worked for Exos Athletes Performance, and I was over in China with them. I worked a little bit with their educational group, and before that, I worked with a big sports performance training company in the United States that specialized in training actually younger athletes. So a lot of my upbringing as a coach was with like your 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds and small group performance training for those guys. So a pretty mixed bag of experience, but that's the short of it.
How long have you been at Exos?
I was with Exos for probably 5 years, maybe 4.5, something like that. I started with them in 2010, and so it'd be 3 or 4. So anyway, started with them in 2010 as we put together a group of Exos performance coaches and physical therapists to go over and help the Chinese before the London Olympics, and that's where I started with them. And then that went well enough that after the Olympics in 2012, we decided I re-upped my contract over in China, and we went back over for a stint in Shanghai working with their athletes and et cetera, until I got recruited by the Chinese women's Olympic team, and and they took me. So that was that.
So, during the time you're in Exos, like what type of like athlete or what type of sport you work with?
Yeah, well, all my time, almost all of my time at Exos was when I was in China. So with China, like before the London Olympics, I was working with the judo team, the shooting team, archery, women's diving, the gymnastics, table tennis. I mean, all of their really cool, fun sports. I got to, because I was the project manager on that group. I got to kind of get a taste of all those different sports. I kind of got to be one of the first people in to do our little dog and pony show. And then when they decided they'd want to get Exos training, we usually find another coach to work with them. But yeah, I got to get my hands dirty with a bunch of really, I mean, best of the best athletes in a bunch of sports that nobody cares about much over the United States. So it's the perfect kind of gig for Exos, who has the bandwidth to be able to support a coach going over to China and working with 4 different sports in a week, that, shooting one day, handball another day, judo another day, and archery in the last day. And there's a brain trust of nerds back at Exos who are just piping me, just sending me information, latest studies on how to train judo athletes, the best of the best. Here's a video on how, the best archers in the United States are learning their craft. So it was a really wonderful kind of support community there that enabled it to work pretty seamlessly. It would have been tough to do if I were just a solo guy, having to, be able to effectively talk the talk with a lot of those coaches who want to see that a little bit about archery and judo and diving, even though you've never done those sports before.
That sounds like if it's just a single guy, I mean, without family, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, right. It's definitely drinking from the fire hose, Eric. No
Yeah.
joke. Like you have this, it is like a first date jitters when you have to walk into, the women's, the diving facility, and you're about to have a conversation with a 3-time gold medalist about how to make them rotate faster in the air, and you've got to come with, you can't embarrass yourself. Like you're just, palms sweating, but luckily the team we had there was awesome, and the team we had back home that was supporting us really let us go in there with guns loaded, so we could not embarrass ourselves. And I think we ended up doing a good job with that contract. They ended up re-signing a couple times, so we were pretty happy about it.
That's nice. So how long have you been married?
Oh God, what a zig and zag. You're just trying to get me off my game right now.
Sorry, man.
No, it's been about a year. Yeah, it's been a year. Yeah. Still getting used to that too. And so my wife is a Chinese national, which is also another wrench in everything because it's hard getting visas and green cards. But yeah, I'm feeling all of that year. I feel like it's been 1 year of straight paperwork, trying to get everything straightened out.
Is all that worked out right now?
No, not at all. Still waiting every day for mail to come in for more information needed. Like there's every day is a new thing. So no, not even close to worked out. Now, if we do this podcast again in like a year, if you ask me and I still haven't got it worked out, I'm say right now, we're getting a divorce. That's it. I can't take it. You heard it here first. There's your hot news. Don't tag my wife on this podcast. Thanks.
Okay, no worries. So, just curious about like how you handle like these kind of job. Like you have to like work with different types of athlete. You have to like study the newest like literature or the new science paper, that kind of stuff, and be able to like hold up your family.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I didn't have a family when I started out in China. And that was probably one of the reasons I got the job is that the Chinese were looking for someone that had a lot of experience, yet wouldn't mind leaving their family for a year to go to China, which, in the Chinese culture is not a big deal. I knew plenty of coaches that were away from their wives for months and months and most of a year. And it was just, you're doing your work and that's part of their culture. That's okay. But in the United States, I don't think it's easy for Exos to find. Well, I know it's not easy for us to staff folks that will go over there for an 8-month stint, a 1-year stint, and leave a wife and kid behind. Almost none of them would. And yet, on the flip side, you have the Chinese Olympic Committee who is saying, "Hey, don't send us any more guys straight out of college. Like, don't send us any guys with 2 years of working experience that haven't gotten married and settled down yet. We want to have people." I mean, that's why guys like me, and then you have on the flip side of me, you have me, the bachelor until he was 48 years old. And then you have, on the flip side, you have a guy like Randy Huntington, who's a retired guy, and so that guy also works out really well in China because, he's another guy that his kids, they're out of the house. Like he's an empty nest guy, he's ready to go. He's ready to go for an adventure, as a last part of his career.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, it would be tougher to do now. I mean, luckily, I'm so addicted to working overseas and my wife is also just loves the adventure of travel and especially Europe. Like, so where I am now, I think it's part of our master plan is to have as long as we can have a lifestyle where we are moving around quite a bit, taking the opportunities, the great opportunities wherever they are in the world, and not letting too firm a root hold us back. And we'll do that for as long as we can until my kid gets a friend, doesn't want to leave. I don't know.
So when exactly do you start those fancy or like funny warm-up movement?
Oh, no joke. Almost immediately. Like I'm in a different situation from the last time we talked. I actually have a little bit of a different situation going on right now in Germany because I have a brand new head coach. We can talk about that in a second. But to answer your question, I think most people at this point know when they hire me. I mean, I guess every job I've had for the last 8 years or so knows what they're getting when they hire me. I just approach, like, especially the warm up. I approach it differently, and I have my way, and it's always going to be a little different. It's always going to be weird, but it might seem to someone who's just looking at little Instagram clips, they'd be like, "Oh my God, I could never sell my head coach on doing this for our warm up before practice." But I've been, you don't hear all the discussions I have with the coach saying, "Hey, I'm using this equipment. I'm using these aqua bags and these jump ropes. I'm doing a hacky sack for these reasons." This is not just crazy. I mean, there are schools of thought that support this in, schools of thought like constraints-led approach, differential learning. Some of these And the science is catching up to this idea of, taking some basic movement patterns and then just throwing a shit ton of noise at it, just throwing a bunch of variability, a bunch of things that force athletes to have to come up with some new solutions that are outside of their existing library of movement solutions to problems. So I just keep creating problems for my athletes over and over again through warm-up, sometimes using volleyballs, sometimes using hacky sacks, water balloons, like stuff I find on YouTube that PE teachers are doing. I can find a way to make that applicable to volleyball in at least a very vague form, but it's always going to be engaging. It's always going to be thermogenic, which is all I need to do is just get them freaking warm. And so as long as I'm ticking those boxes, very quickly, the athletes respond to it. The head coach gets on board. You don't want athletes that are just sleepwalking through the first 15 minutes of a warm-up, or of a session with you. So pretty quickly, this year was different though. Like my head coach came in real strong, and he also specializes in warm-ups, and he has his own. He's also a master of kind of differential learning, doing very outside the box volleyball games where, you have to have one hand shoved in your pocket, the other hand, you have to just chicken wing the ball the whole time. And there's, 5 hits per side, and you have to, sit down on the ground and get up. Like he thinks of just an amazing variety of kind of skill acquisition. Like he's just trying to create creative athletes, and he uses the warm-up as that time. Very quickly, we realized that our two methods mesh really well together. And so generally speaking, he would often take the first 5 minutes of warm-up to do these kind of differential learning games with the volleyball. Then I would take over and do my version of either microdosing some strength, adding some games to get rid of some tension, doing some movement skill stuff, races, whatever it is that I want to accomplish that day. And so that's kind of the way it went this year. And actually, I think that's the way I would choose to do it going forward. It was really eye-opening. I learned a lot this year from him.
That's great. That's great. So I'm gonna jump into the question I sent it to you. Is that okay? Cool. I think there's cold. And do you have ice on in the glass?
Yes, you heard the tinkling?
Yeah.
Oh boy, sorry.
No worries. Is it cold over there? I thought it's cold over there.
It's cold over there, but I still like a nice chilly glass. It's warm in the house. Okay. My mom I'm at my parents' house. My mom's like a 70-year-old woman. She keeps the house really piping hot.
That's good. That's good.
Right.
So the first question is like, we know like how to train an athlete, and for volleyball or for like basketball or whatever the athlete, what kind of sport they like play, there's like we all probably have to use like forceplate and do some kind of like counter movement jump or like squat jump right now. So in order to like train our athlete, or in order to let them like jump higher, is there anything you're going to be focusing on?
Yeah, great question. So yes, I think that every athlete is a little bit of a puzzle in this way, because there's, if there was one recipe for making athletes jump higher, then we would all know what that was, because it would have been proven out a million times, right? We would all know that snatches are the best thing to do, or jump squats, or rear foot elevated split. There is no one thing, because every athlete is just a little bit different. Some athletes who are elastic can benefit from more strength. Some athletes that are super strong but don't actually jump very high could probably benefit from some more elasticity. Maybe the key for that person is to be doing more sprints. Maybe they're just not good at hip hiking. Like there are just so many nuances to this that it's not easy. But I don't want to give you a wishy-washy answer of it depends. So let me just start talking, and we'll see if we can come around to what is a general philosophy on increasing jump height. Generally speaking, I definitely believe in getting strong enough. So from a just pure strength standpoint, I believe that let's just speak about female volleyball players, but once my team is able to squat around 100 kilos for 5 down to a depth where they normally play defense or jump, right? So not super deep. But once they're able to do that, I stop worrying about getting much stronger. I think there are huge diminishing returns to chasing big weights in squats beyond what is just necessary to be a good jumper. And I think that very roughly that I can get to 95 to 105 kilos with everybody for 5 sets of 5 and feel real good about their basic squatting strength. Similarly, I like 60 kilos. I like every girl to get to 60 kilos in a Bulgarian rear foot elevated split squat. That is just, for now, that is our main single leg glute dominant kind of exercise. And that's kind of the goal that we all go for. The moment we hit those goals, it's just maintenance while we work that other side of the spectrum, and we are jumping with weights. We are jumping off of boxes, one-legged, two-legged, varying the landings, varying the planes of motion all over the place. So every day, a general philosophy is that every day we go into a weight room, you're going to see similar patterns. You're going to see a squatting action. You're going to see something off of a single leg. In a given week, you're going to see something that forces like a hip hike out of them for my single leg jumpers. You're going to see things that are weighted at 5 RM, 3 RM, but you're also going to see stuff that we completely unload that we are doing with just body weight. I mean, we can talk about this in a second, but this is a big, if we want to talk kind of muscle slack, like this is a big part of understanding muscle slack, is that if you're doing all of your plyometrics and all of your weight training with load is like a cheater's code to getting rid of muscle slack. Every time you have a heavy bar on your back, your muscles get the slack out of them. They're all tensed up, they're pre-tensed. When you don't have that, that's a crutch, right? So you go out to the volleyball court and you're used to having this pre-tension of either a weight on your back or always using a counter movement to tense your muscles. And now you don't have that anymore. And every time the stimulus is to go over here to my right, I'm having to waste valuable seconds or milliseconds taking tension out of my muscle, or putting tension into my muscles, pre-tensing my muscles before I actually have that any movement is going towards that ball on the right-hand side. So if I'm making my athletes more explosive, better jumpers, Eric, I have to be tuned to not only making them jump high, but to make them jump high quickly. It's absolute amateur hour to not care about the speed at which your athletes are getting off the ground. If you look at my starting 6 volleyball players on every team I've played for, one thing I think a lot of them have in common is that they're very fast jumpers. They might not be the highest jumpers on my team, but given very little counter movement, they can get it very explosive. Given no counter movement, they can be very explosive, and that makes them dangerous. So that's what we're looking when I'm saying we're trying to solve the puzzle on a lot of girls, that if you just do a standard jump test, a standard vertical jump test, then a lot of times they're going to use an arm swing that they don't use when they're at the net. They're going to do a depth that they don't use when they're actually playing volleyball. It becomes not even a very valid measure of what they're able to put together on the court. And so for them, a critical piece of the jump training puzzle is, I'm fortunate to have like jump mats, and I don't have force plates, but I have the ability to use in every session a jump mat that'll let me know how many milliseconds it takes to get off the ground. And it will put a little red light out there if it takes them too long to get off the ground. So that's another big part of the training, is making sure that we get strong enough. And from there, the speed work covers the full spectrum of percentage of 1 RM down to body weight, but also making sure we're training counter movements, no counter movements, short counter movements, responsiveness off of a box. And when you have 3 training sessions a week and also warm-ups in which I can put some of this stuff, this is kind of the beauty of turning your warm-ups into a microdosing session, is I can do a lot of this work before training every day too. And so, I got a lot of opportunities to get these girls to jump in meaningful ways. And so I can usually take a step back, look at my whole week of 3 strength training sessions and 20 warm-ups and get all of those things in a given week. Like I can step back and say, hey, have I done body weight, non-counter movement squats? Okay, good. Have I done lightweight, like 5 kilo, spike jumps, like as complete. I also like completely believe in getting as sport specific as possible. So light bars that the girls can throw on their backs and actually do an approach spike jump with is always going to be part of my regimen. And then the last piece is testing the shit out of it. I'm always testing, always monitoring. I want that is an enormous key to jump training, is making sure the girls see themselves improving and also me making sure they're improving. So I know that if it's not working out, okay, I need to work another gear. I need to pull another lever on this girl's training because she's not improving. So maybe she isn't strong enough, or maybe I'm not spending enough time doing elastic work with her. Maybe I need to do another test to figure this out. Anyway, all right. I think I just talked for that was just stream of consciousness. All right. Anyway.
No worries, man. No worries. I love that. So, volleyball is a sport that include like tons of jumping. So how do you microdose those kind of like plyo in the training and without them getting injury?
Yeah, it has to be, all jumps have to be meaningful. And I'll be honest, I know a lot of coaches out there have like a strict jump count thing. I don't. I absolutely don't. Just because the jumps are myriad and it's hard to quantify, the jump rope we might be doing, jump rope variations, to low box jumps that we do a lot of too, like single leg low box jumping, like repetitive single leg low box jumping for ankle stiffness. It's hard to put that in the same. Basically, Eric, it would drive me crazy if I had to do it. If I had to say, okay, we did 100 low box jumps on their ankles, but maybe it was the 5 sets of 3 depth jumps that we did that are the ones that, like, how to calibrate which one of those has the effect on the girls. So but your question's a good one. So I don't do meaningless plyos. And if we are doing body weight plyos, I'm almost always jumping onto something to mitigate all the landings, because the jumping's not a problem. Of course, it's all the landings. And so if we're going to be doing landings, it needs to be a meaningful landing, meaning I love to have a weight on their back when they're landing, because that to me is like a sneaky way of being able to do, eccentric training, being able to do load absorption, deceleration training. If you were to watch the girls in a given session and they have 60 kilos on a bar and they're just doing jump squats on a jump mat, and we're seeing who can jump 60 kilos the highest, and you would see that the jump part, but a very important part of that exercise is how many times they're landing with 60 kilos on their back, because I'm talking about already about creating fast jumpers. Well, being able to land and not like land super soft and spongy like we might at the beginning of a season. Like at the beginning of the season, I might not mandate that you have to land and absorb force as quickly as possible. But by the end of the season, I don't want to see you get mushy on a landing. I want to see stiffness on that landing. I want to see that you are, of course, bending. I don't want you to land with straight knees, and that's just ridiculous. But I want to see that you can get those muscles to couple and rate of force development to get you to slam on the brakes as quickly as possible. That's only going to make you better at change of direction when that occurs, or in having a fast jump off of a quick block that you need to make.
Cool. So you mentioned that you're going to be like testing or like monitoring whenever you get the chance to do it. So, and there's like sports technology is like crazy right now. So without a force plate, is there anything you can be looking at? And do you think that having it, because like there's gonna be a lot of coaches or a lot of like facilities that are gonna buy tons of like force plate, that kind of stuff. So for those coaches who like probably don't have the budget to buy these stuff, what should they be doing, or what should they be? Yeah.
So I also don't have a force plate. I've actually never had access to a force plate in my entire career, which is crazy. And it makes me feel like total imposter syndrome when I get around all the other strength coaches that have one. Although to be fair, they can get confused even amongst themselves at like what is the most meaningful metrics to be looking at. So I actually feel okay about it. I bought myself a jump mat a long time ago. I already talked about it. This is the way that this is the way I keep my job. I have to be able to show, I love to be able to show the head coach, by the way, look at how much higher we're jumping. So even if I didn't have that though, being tested on jumps is something that will happen at least twice a week to my team. There's no test day. Like I hate test days. I hate the logistics of it. I hate the stress of it. I hate all of it. Instead, I want to have testing just be part of training so that in my weight room, there almost every single session, if not every session, my jump mat will be in a different part of the weight room and there will be a different task assigned to it. And so sometimes it's weighted and that doesn't necessarily tell me a lot because again, when I put weight on them, it doesn't tell me a lot about the muscle slack that I'm taking out. It's not exactly the transfer I'm looking for, but very often, at least once a week, we're just doing a straight up volleyball jump. That's your plyometric for the day. That's a meaningful landing to me to be able to just come over, get your 3 best, block jumps or your 3 best approach jump, spike jumps. That goes into a big spreadsheet and the girls all get extremely excited about it. And if I sense that they're not getting excited about it very much, I gamify it. I just pair them up into groups of 2 and have them compete with each other, not compete with that team. All the teams compete to see who has the highest coupled vertical jump of the group. So that gets everybody fired up. So there has to be energy around the tests. And so I'm constantly manipulating variables or groups of people together to see if I can come up with something that in the weight room, I know where the jump mat is because that's where all the cheering is coming from. That's where all the crazy screams and hollering and like not only do I get to just test throughout the season, I always have a good feel for where we're trending, but also it's just a weight room culture boon for me. I couldn't live without my jump mat or without a jump mat, at least like, jump tape, jump something that's getting tested because it's a source of girls coming up to me and saying, oh my God, I just did X, high five. Or, oh my God, we just won the jump challenge, high five. And for me, it just creates a culture in the weight room that I like.
Great. So probably for those coaches who haven't get the chance to like work with the fanciest new technology, this is the way they can like create their own way to like
yeah, I just read on Sportsmith a great article that came out about why no one's doing lateral broad jump testing. I was like, oh my God, that would be a great addition to my routine in the weight room. Just set up a chalk line on the floor and a ruler, right? A tape measure that goes out to the left and have everybody start on one leg and let's see who can jump I don't know what exactly the protocol might be, but let's see how far everybody can jump moving laterally. I've never done that before. It makes complete sense. It's applicable to volleyball. We have to be able to make huge lateral moves. I've never tested it regularly. I've never tested it. So I can't wait to incorporate that into my next season's protocol. That might just be part of our Wednesday workouts for a little bit. And then I'll, of course, being me, I'll throw some weights on them for a while, and then I'll make them do a 180-degree twist in the air one day while they do it. I'll measure it that way just to get them firing and and we'll just get nuts with it.
Love it. So you mentioned that when doing like plyo, you're gonna put some weight on it, no matter it's like squat jump or whatever it is. So how exactly do you pair like strength training with the plyo, no matter it's like with load, with weight, or without weight?
Yeah. So I start pretty early trying to build up the amount of load I can put on the athlete's back and get them jumping. So maybe the first week of the season, on a day when we would be doing a unilateral heavy lift, let's say it's a Bulgarian day, or maybe we're doing skater squats because we only have a Smith machine or something. So on a heavy unilateral one leg day, I would pair that with a explosive squat jump. And on week 1, that would just be with a 20 kilo bar on your back. And we'd be doing, and for that, we could absolutely do sets of 5. I don't feel any problem with that. And again, I'm telling them, hey, just make sure you're super soft and absorbing on that landing, right? It's first week of the season. Let's just get the shock absorbers working, but don't worry about slamming on the brakes. Let's make it nice and easy. And it's as simple as the next week, that 20 kilo bar is 22.5. Next week, 25. Next week, 27.5. I'll just increase it by 2.5 kilos throughout the season. And next thing you know, we're at 60 kilos, doing jumps of maybe 3 by the end of the season, something like that. But no one has a problem jumping with 60 kilos on their back. And like I said, I'll take a week off and we'll go super light again. I'll take a week off. I'll do blah, blah, blah. But it's such a volleyball specific exercise. I've always inherently disliked squatting because anytime you're not jumping at the end of a barbell exercise, you're teaching your body to slow down, right? Anytime I stop at the top of a lift, that's me decelerating to make sure that I'm not going to leave the ground. Well, I hate teaching my athletes' bodies to decelerate. So as often as possible, unless the weight is super freaking heavy, I want us jumping with it. And so that's the way that I'll usually coordinate these things. So in the next weight training session, if it is a bilateral exercise, like a deadlift or a squat that's heavy that day, then it's more of a single leg explosive movement. That if and it could be just as simple as maybe a single leg box squat that I'm putting a weight on their back. I couldn't use much weight because it's single leg. Or it's an approach jump with, again, 5 kilos. And that goes from 5 to 7.5 to 10. And I'm just slowly working up. Like anything, it's progressive resistance. Nothing new to any strength coach out there. But sometimes I think we try to make things more complicated than they need to be. Just make it a little heavier every week and start everybody the same. And then when you see somebody starting to have some trouble, they stay at that level. Everybody else keeps progressing. If it's easy for somebody, then they jump ahead of weight. And by the end of the season, everybody's on different weights. But at the beginning, just look, use your eyes, look, make it easier for the girls that need it to be easier. That's it.
So you mentioned you do it kind of so I'm gonna put it this way. In the beginning of the season, there's probably their conditioning aren't that good, their strength level, their power level aren't that good. So you start at 20 kilo, right? But on whatever the NSCA says, we probably should have probably should be able to squat 1.5 their body weight to introduce plyo. So how do you or what are your thoughts on this?
I feel like that's just a running joke now, right? I mean, nobody believes that anymore, right? I mean, is this just one of the questions you ask everybody just to see how they respond to this? I mean, again, it's the same thing. Plyos, what are plyos? Like a jump roping versus, skipping versus it's all plyos, and I get, for me, it's much more of sure, if I drop a girl off a box and the box is too high and I see her totally fumble and collapse and it takes her 3 seconds to get back off the floor, then yeah, I effed up. She's not strong enough. Got to put her on a lower box. I would never embarrass one of the players on my team so much as to say, you're not ready for plyometrics. I know you jumped all day today. So I'm in a different crowd right now. But even if I were back in my early days of performance training where I have young athletes, can't imagine sitting a kid out because he hasn't hit 1.5 body weight on squat, not letting him jump to a box or off a box. Oh, what a ridiculous notion. It seems like a big association trying to cover their ass. I bet I just lost my NSCA membership. I don't know. I should check this.
Sorry for that, man. Sorry for that.
You just set me up.
Just pop up in my head. Sorry for that.
Bye-bye, NSCA Coach of the Year. Thanks, Eric. There that went.
Sorry.
No, it is it's a valid question though of when, because plyos are in tiers of aggressiveness, and I actually don't do a lot of depth jumps. I'll do, but there are we'll do eccentric, like heavy eccentric deadlifts using like a trap bar and, 5 seconds down, then explode up onto a box. Well, that's a little bit of an aggressive plyometric, and maybe I wouldn't do that with everybody. It just involves being smart, and I'm lucky. My athletes don't come to me with like a beer gut and, having just taken up smoking in the off season. They come to me in pretty good shape. They come to me in okay shape, and I quickly gate, and they know now, especially it's tough your first year when they don't know what you want. Now they know what I want. They know that if they're not doing Bulgarians during their time away from me, that I'm going to make them horribly sore in their first couple of weeks, because I have no sympathy for them, slacking off there. But yeah, I'm lucky that I have a group that I don't have to worry about that too much with.
Cool. Last question before I let you go, okay? So at Exos, we're always gonna start with like the, not gonna say perfect, but probably the good landing posture.
Yeah.
The landing posture is gonna be good. But in their sports, they're probably going to have like tons of chances like they're gonna land weirdly. So how exactly do you is it like you're gonna teach them how to land differently, or how is it?
I'm glad you brought up that Exos is some of the best at this, because Exos, I think, does, and it's because Exos combines the physical therapy side of things with it. Physical therapists who have to fix the problems if a strength coach is doing all these things wrong, like they're watching every session. They're part of this process. So that's a great thing about Exos, is they quickly figured out that the physical therapists need to be part of making sure that the training is done well, because the strength coaches, if left to their own devices, might just be trying to put them on as high a box as possible or jump to the highest box and not care about landing mechanics. So Exos's protocols of making sure that everything looks gorgeous on landings is something I still preach. Now, what you said is also right. I think that there is a separate time that needs to be devoted, especially towards what I call out of alignment strength. All of the messy landings, all of the stuff that, if you spend your entire training time, all the time in the weight room with me, all the time in warm-ups with me, in perfect neutral spine alignment with knees that are perfectly lined up under your hips, over your toe, or over your feet, and you never are getting strong in imperfect postures, rounded backs, knees in valgus, and I think you're doing your athletes a disservice, because they are going to find themselves in those positions, right? If I don't prepare them for that, they could get hurt rounding their back, putting groceries into a car, or putting a suitcase up, just because they're crazy strong with a neutral spine, but I've made them completely unprepared for that. So that's another reason that you need to take control of your warm-up to be a place where you actually get meaningful work done. Because whereas I don't have time for that in my weight room, I want to do other stuff generally in the weight room. We do some of it, but in our warm-ups is where we'll do valgus knees, squats. We'll walk on the outsides of our ankles to get our ankles stronger. We do rounded back strength like Jefferson curls. We do all kinds of pulling strength with a rounded back. Again, progressed from super light weights at the beginning of the season, slowly up. But just crucial, I think, to keeping athletes prepared for all of the mess that they're going to come into when they get into the games. And that's, honestly, to swing back to warm-ups again with what my head coach does a good job right now, which is like, if you want them to get a little stronger with a rounded back, or you set up lines that they have to go duck under between every pass, and you can constrain the shit out of that volleyball, a silly volleyball game, or even a game of tag or duck goose or whatever it is, to force the athletes into rounded back positions. You just have to be a little bit creative about it. And you have to, that's the great thing about some outside of the box thinking about the way your sport is played. is, you can get them into some weird positions, and all of a sudden there's creativity that comes out of it, but there's also making some weird shapes that they might just find themselves in when they play volleyball.
Great. Love this. Getting your athletes strong at every position. Love that.
Yeah,
so
good. It's a great question. I wish more people talked about it.
I think people are noticing it like recently.
Well, now Exos just is now they're mad at me. So you've just successfully gotten everybody. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Exos is on top of this too. I haven't checked in on their methodology recently. I'm sure they're on top of it.
Cool. So that's kind of all the question I have for today. So if there's like coaches or therapists are interested in what we are talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, find me on Instagram, Rettasaurus. Yeah, RETTASAURUS.
Cool. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, Eric. I always love this.